Purposely. Your life, God's purpose. Listen at purposely.com.
Friends, you're going to want to really listen up today. I am Julie Lyles Carr of the allmomdoes podcast, part of the Purposely Podcast Network. And you know that I love bringing on guests who really challenge the way we think and give us tools that help us live life better. And if you are a consistent listener, you know that a lot of times this past year, in the last several episodes, we've been talking a lot about the Sober Curious movement, about addiction cycles, about neurology, about how sometimes our brains trick us into doing some things that we know aren't the best for us. And when I realized that this epic thought leader that we have in our ranks, the guy who has taught us all kinds of things about our personality, who has spoken into so many things about the way that we live out our faith, when I realized that he had a new book about his own journey and some of the existing tools that are already out there, but in a fresh way of looking at those tools, I couldn't wait. I was right on the emails going, yes, let's please have him on. So I want you to welcome Ian Morgan Cron. Ian, thank you so much for being with me today.
Well, hey, Julie, I'm glad to be here.
It is fantastic. And I got to meet your office dog, Percy, which was just a complete bonus. What a precious, precious family member. You have been around for a long time doing ministry, life, writing. And if you've heard Ian's name and you're thinking, where do I know his name? It's because he is the Enneagram guy. He's the guy. And that's why you may have recognized his name. But you've had a lot of other topics and subjects that you've delved into through the years. So give the listener just a little snapshot of life, where you're living, and the career path that you've been following.
Oh, gosh. Well, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I am a husband of almost 40 years. I have 3 kids. I am an Episcopal priest. I'm a trained psychotherapist. I am an author of 5 books on various topics. 2, though, which were specifically about the Enneagram, which are probably the more well-known of those 5 books. And now my latest book, The Fix, How the 12 Steps Offer a Surprising Path of Transformation for the Well-Adjusted, the Down and Out, and everyone in between, which is about how the 12 steps of recovery that have helped countless millions of, self-identified addicts, alcoholics, that thing, could be incredibly beneficial for everybody.
I love that. One of the things I appreciate in your work, both with the Enneagram and with this new book, The Fix on the 12 Steps, is that you're taking systems, approaches, thoughts that have been out there, wisdom that's been out there, and you're helping reframe it for us. And that's one of the things that I love. It's not that you're showing up with jazz hands going, I developed something new. You're saying, listen, there's wisdom. There are tools that people have used for a long time to lead better lives. Here's a way that we can look at it through contemporary eyes. Now, I have someone I'm really close to in my life who I love very much, who has fought addiction. And they tried some different systems. They tried some different, if you want to say faith-based, they had all kinds of things they were working through. And honestly, Ann, I have to tell you, it was when they said, you know what, I'm going to go through the 12-step journey, that things really shifted for them. So I may have a listener who's like, I'm not really sure what the 12-step thing is they're talking about. I'm hanging with y'all. Okay, I heard about an office dog and I heard about an Enneagram, but I don't know what the 12-step thing is. So can you back up and tell the listener, when we talk about the 12 steps, what are we talking about?
Great. Thank you. So, way back in the 1930s, there was a stockbroker who we now know as Bill W., or his full name was Bill Wilson. And Bill Wilson was a hopeless alcoholic. And he came in contact with a Christian organization or group known as the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group had 6 steps that were part of their spiritual design for living. Bill W. had this powerful experience in this hospital room where he was dying from alcoholism. And as a result of his contact with this group, he never drank again, ever. And he realized that he took those 6 steps and then expanded them out to 12 steps and then founded Alcoholics Anonymous, right? This is all part and parcel of that whole journey. Now there are hundreds of 12-step recovery groups. You could be in Spenders Anonymous, Shoppers Anonymous, Gamblers Anonymous, Overeaters Anonymous, which is a huge one, Narcotics Anonymous, Al-Anon, or Codependency Anonymous. I mean, the list goes on and on. All of them share one thing in common. They use the 12 steps as a spiritual design for living that has led them into a spiritual awakening of sufficient force that it has rendered their needs for food, drugs, sex, porn, or whatever your thing is unnecessary now. Like you just don't need to do it anymore because you've actually fixed the problem that was really at the root of whatever addictive compulsive behavior or self-defeating behavior you were engaged in.
And what do you think sometimes the hesitation is in faith circles? And this is going to be kind of a big question, but I'm hoping to distill it down a little bit. Sometimes we can feel a resistance in our faith communities toward topics like the Enneagram, sometimes even with the 12-step program, that we feel like it isn't Christianized enough, or if we don't know that if it had Christian roots, those kinds of things. And I can see people sometimes reject some of these tools right out of the gate because they may have seen some of these things interpreted in a way or used in a way that they're not comfortable with. What do you say to somebody who's like, I know I need some help. I know I need some insight. I know I need some things, but I'm a little worried about engaging with some of these types of tools.
I feel very sorry for those people because usually it's a lot of anxiety that's just floating around in their system. But when I do have opportunity to speak with them, particularly on the 12 steps, first of all, it does derive from a Christian organization. You cannot read the steps and in any way, shape, or form see anything in them that is in opposition to what the gospel says about what constitutes a really good life. The steps are about really taking care of three areas of life. One is repairing and deepening your relationship with God, with yourself, and then with others, and then cultivating a lifestyle of love and service to the world. That's just the gospel. That's the 12 steps in miniature, right?
Right.
And the steps are designed to root out those things in your life that are preventing you from enjoying those relationships in an unobstructed way, right? So I don't have any concern about the steps being something that someone would be worried about. Now, sometimes I'll run into people of faith and they're like, well, it talks about a higher power, but that's not specifically Jesus. And I'm like, well, you can make it specifically Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like
It's not telling you can't be, you know what I mean? Like I'm a person of faith. I go to 12-step meetings and I have lots of friends. And they're like, yeah, but it's misleading people. And I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. It's like, I always get nervous when I'm around people who want to apply purity tests. It makes me very nervous because the presumption there is they've got it all figured out and everybody else is wrong. In which case I can't even have a conversation with you because your mind is too closed. Your heart is too closed. I'm always reminding people, like God sets the bar pretty low for friendship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, for some people, just going from not believing to just being open to a higher power is a really good first step. So why don't we let them have that first?
Yeah.
Like, why do we want to make this so hard for people? It all sounds so pharisaical to me. So look, everyone's entitled to their opinion. And I've sort of gotten to a place in the culture now where I don't even fight these battles. I'm like, moving on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your opinion. Moving on.
Thank you. Yeah. It's powerful. You've seen it and you don't have to convince. It's okay.
No.
It's okay. I like what you say that, I think sometimes we have an idea that there are those people who have addictions and they're over there and we're praying for them and they're going to go to whatever program and do whatever. And we're the people who aren't having those issues. Oh, isn't that sweet? And yet you say, friend, let me just throw a gentle elbow in here and say, we're all somewhere on the addiction spectrum. And my friend, I have to say, amen, brother, because I know we all have things we do to soothe, to deal, to cope. And sometimes those things really get hold of us. And sometimes it's kind of like one of my siblings who I won't name, who carried around his blanket from the time, his baby blanket for years and years, and it's probably still packed in his garage. And that's okay. Like, it's not hurting anybody. It's not. And so I think sometimes we can have a real, in a strange way, one-upmanship about how we view addiction, what actually qualifies as addiction. Well, yeah, maybe I deal with this, but I'm not on meth kind of, attitudes towards some things. How do you define what you're calling this addiction spectrum? And what are your observations about how you see it playing out in people's lives today?
Well, first of all, I love what the Christian psychiatrist Gerald May once said. He said, to be alive is to be addicted, and to be alive and addicted is to stand in need of grace.
Mm-hmm.
1,700 years ago, the church mothers and fathers were talking about attachments, which is the word that today we would use is addiction, right? It's the same thing.
Right.
We form attachments with things to relieve distress. It's just the big ache of being a human being in the world. And sometimes they can be on the mild end of the spectrum, or they can be on the severe end of the spectrum. On the mild end of the spectrum, Maybe you have an addictive relationship with people pleasing, or, you just have these patterns, these habituated patterns, all the way up to something really severe and potentially fatal, right? So there is a spectrum, but the fact of the matter is that all the great spiritual teachers taught that attachments or addictions of any kind, no matter how mild or severe, have a diminishing effect on our relationship with God, ourselves, and others, always. So by way of addiction, let's just define it as any compulsive, unhealthy relationship with a person, a behavior, or a substance that has mood-altering effects, changes the way you feel, and negative consequences. So let's just take a really common one, workaholism.
Yep.
Now, I'm just telling you, I've seen workaholism kill a ton of people. Like we just call it socially acceptable addictive behavior.
Right. We celebrate the stress. Yeah.
but listen, it's a spiritual disease.
Absolutely.
Workaholism, let me just repeat that. Though we laud it and we applaud people for making a gajillion dollars or even, not making a gajillion dollars, but building a multi-site church, right, on 80 hours of work a week, right? Well, let's just look at this for a second. So you have a compulsive relationship with work. You can't stop. You'd like to stop, maybe. Maybe sometimes you try to stop, but you can't, right? It has mood-altering effect. It makes you feel good about yourself, makes you feel powerful, it makes you feel like you have prestige, makes you feel like you're worthwhile, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it provides you with symbols of success in whatever milieu whatever that might mean. Like that could be money, or it could be a full church, right? It just doesn't matter. So it has mood-altering effect, and it has negative consequences because you're never home. Your kids don't know you. Your spouse feels neglected. Your health is going down the drain because you work too much. You don't have time to exercise. You have no time. I'm sorry. And no matter how hard you try, you can't stop. I've seen this played out so many times in my life. It's ridiculous, right? That's an addiction. That's an attachment, right? Now, it doesn't matter. What happens in the brain to that person around work is precisely the same thing that happens to somebody who's a heroin addict. It's the exact same reward circuitry in their brain. It's the same dopamine, right? It comes out in a different concentration, but it's the same dynamic. And ultimately, it's a spiritual problem that requires a spiritual solution. And that's what the steps are.
Right, right. I love this that you say our addictions are fueled by the mistaken belief that something outside of us can heal the pain inside of us. And I've seen it myself. I've grappled with it myself within the context of workaholism, within the context of ministry, on and on and on. Like if I don't keep all these plates spinning, it's all going to fall. And that beautiful wash of hormones we get when we feel super needed and we feel important and we feel like we're making productivity. And you're right. It is that same loop that we get in. And yet, what are we trying to resolve that's inside? And whether that is that inner voice that says, you're not enough yet, or you're not trying hard enough, or if you don't hit this level, or if you don't overcome, or even just trying to mute places where we might feel rejected or might feel like we aren't measuring up, and we do it through other substances. That thing of trying to get an external relief for something internal that keeps gnawing at us, we all are subject to that. Why do you think, is there something magical, if you will, forgive the term, but is there something about it that it's 12 steps or that it used to be 6? Or is there something in our minds that likes certain numbers of things that we walk through? Like, what is that? And does it have anything to do with the efficacy that we see of this process?
I don't think so. I just think it's 12 steps. Honestly, I don't think there's any magic to it. I just think it was how it could have been 11. It could have been 14. Who knows? It just panned out to be 12. I love that the steps have a kind of inner genius to them, right? Like I said, it begins by, hey, let's look at our relationship with God. Then it moves to, let's look at our relationship with ourselves and then to others. And it's really about how do you build a life where things that have previously been ruptured, and I'm talking about relationships, can be healed. And when those things are healed, then suddenly our need for numbing behaviors, substances, or ways of being in the world, we just don't need them anymore.
Right.
So it just takes the power away from them. People oftentimes think that the 12 steps are, this is going to teach people how to not drink. It's like, actually, that's not what they're for. In fact, none of the steps ever talks about it. Never says that. The whole stated purpose of the steps is to facilitate a spiritual awakening. This is what they're supposed to do for you. They are supposed to facilitate a spiritual awakening of sufficient power that you no longer need people-pleasing, drinking, work, drugs, sex, porn, betting, gambling, shopping, spending. Those things is like, I don't even need to do that anymore because I have solved the problem that those things I was using to solve the problem.
Right.
You see that?
Right.
So now I can actually walk away from any of those things without any effort on my part, because why would I use those things now?
Because you're truly getting to the root. And
Yes.
there are physiological realities to cutting off behaviors that have been addictive for
Sure.
us. And there are times that people are going to need a level of professionalism medically to be able to uncouple in a healthy way from substances that have been keeping them going for quite a while. And yet, even if you go through those processes, there still has to be something to create that inner healing in order to really get past what's going on.
So there's no question that there are certain addictions that require medical attention and support. And, I know lots of people involved, most people, and I know who work the 12 steps also see therapists or counselors, or if they're not seeing them now, they have in the past. There are all kinds of supportive things we can do on the journey toward wholeness. And that's really what this journey is about. It's about a journey toward wholeness. And when I talk about wholeness, then I got to talk about your diet. I got to talk about exercise. I have to talk about relationships and community. I need to talk to you about purpose and meaning in your life as it relates to work and vocation, right? It's a big picture. So I'm all in favor of supportive outside help. At the end of the day, though, for me personally, I love the steps because it frames addiction as a spiritual problem that all of us have. And when you see it that way, you realize, okay, Julie, let me put it this way to you. Let's say you came to me and you said, oh, Ian, I have a spending addiction. Now, by the way, you do know people with shopping addictions, don't you?
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Okay. So every time a bad feeling comes up, maybe a new pair of shoes will fix this, right? So you could say to me, I have a shopping problem, or my husband has a drinking problem. I would say to you, Julie, you don't have a shopping problem. You have a shopping solution.
Yeah.
And your husband does not have a drinking problem. Your husband has a drinking
solution. Yeah.
That's not the problem. That is a symptom of the problem, but it is not itself the problem. It's a distraction if you think that's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is really inside you. You have a big ache, and it may be trauma. It may be just pain. It may be anxiety. It could be depression. It could be a low self-esteem. It could be, carrying a lot of grief and sadness and all of these, or a mix of all the above, right? And it forms like this big ache at the center of your person. Everybody has it to one degree or another. Sometimes it's loud and burning hot. Other times it's quiet and cool, but we all have it, right? And you have found a solution to that problem. But now that solution has become a bigger problem than the problem it was trying to solve.
Right.
Now you have two problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And here's the way out. Right. And it's just great gospel truths.
I love that. Ian, it makes me think about, particularly when I was still in vocational ministry and the stress that comes with being in vocational ministry, and the way I was dealing with the stress was I was doing lots of long distance running. And this is before we really understood what sometimes that level of endurance sports will do to your cortisol levels. And so I look back and I'm like, yeah, I was resolving one kind of stress, but I was creating a whole other level of stress on myself. That just makes me think about what you're saying. These were my solutions, but the problem was still, the level of what was going on in the stress and the over responsibility and the oldest daughter stuff and all of that. So yeah.
Like, listen, we have to turn and face the pain, and people don't want to do that. But if you don't, you will come up for solutions to your pain that will cause you more pain.
Right.
Like I have a friend of mine who says all addiction starts with pain and ends with pain. And everybody, I don't care who you are, like this us them mentality about addictions and things like that. It is the nature, it is in our condition to form attachments with things that, as a way of bypassing God's love, mercy, and grace and staying in control of our own lives, like we all have them, and we need to face the pain that drives us to them.
That bypass language, I think, is really powerful, because that is where we're refusing to exit and lean into that grace and mercy that we just keep going on the spaghetti spool of all of the overpasses, trying to avoid what really is there. Yeah.
Well, and in the fix, I talk about it, right? Like in that great passage where it talks, about how we all are like trying to drink from broken wells, right? Broken cisterns in the original language. And the problem is they leak.
Yeah.
So you can keep going back, but you will always leave eventually more thirsty than when you got there.
Right.
That's the nature of addictions. You know, and I know that if you get into, we have a lot of moms on here, right?
Right.
So look, do you know how many moms I've met that I've had to wean them off their addiction to their children?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Right. Their self-esteem was derived from their children's success.
Mm-hmm.
Their whole life became fixated on their children. They abandoned themselves to a degree that they should not have. It's called codependency.
Right.
It had mood-altering effect and negative consequences.
Right.
Their kids go off to college. The kids may be somewhat emotionally crippled because now they don't believe they can live without their mom.
Mm-hmm.
Like mom has not set them free as empowered people in the world. And mom has a complete and utter breakdown because the source of her self-esteem has now gone to college or has gotten married, actually fallen in love with someone more than them. And
the nerve, the absolute nerve.
The absolute nerve. Yes. And by the way, do you know what that depression is when your kids leave home? And I mean, empty nest syndrome is a kind of healthy grief in that. But sometimes when I see that it's disproportionate, I'm like, what you're in right now is called withdrawal, right?
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's just, you're in withdrawal.
Mm-hmm. And you're going to feel all those feelings.
Your kids were your drug of choice.
Mm-hmm.
And you are in withdrawal right now.
Yeah.
And it will pass. But you now have to start to develop your own sense of self apart from them.
Right.
So I know that some people will hear this and be like, well, no, that makes no sense. I'm just being a good mom. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard those kinds of rationalizations before.
We've seen that movie before. Yeah.
I've seen this movie before lots of times.
Exactly.
And it always ends the same way.
The same way. I love this line where you say the shortest distance between you and the person you want to become is the truth.
Yeah.
And that truth can be hard to onboard. You've been very transparent in your work, both in your podcast and your books, about your own recovery journey over 30 years with alcohol. When were you at the place where you were ready to look at the truth? How long did that take before? Because the truth is popping up all the time around you, but so often we're like, no, I don't want to see. No, I'm just being a good mom. No, this is self-care. No, it was just an evening out with the friends.
Yeah.
And we don't want to look at the truth. So how was that for you in your journey?
Well, this is what happens, right? You form a relationship with a person, a behavior, or a substance that provides you with feeling soothed, seen, gives you a sense of safety and security. And eventually the pain that thing causes you, or that relationship causes you, becomes greater than the pain involved with looking at the truth of your life. At which point you're like, I think I'd rather go to the root of the problem and deal with it than continue to be lost inside of this false counterfeit solution to the problem. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's called the gift of desperation, right? When you get desperate enough and you're ready, you'll go face the truth. And here's the good news about the truth, right? Like there's a prayer in the fix that I talk about that I love. It's by a Catholic nun whose last name I can't pronounce. But basically, she says something to the effect of, dare to face the truth about yourself, no matter how beautiful it is.
Oh, wow.
Because we tend to think of this journey as being like, I just got to look at what a lousy, rotten sinner I am. It's like, that's actually not the truth, right? The truth is you're a mixed bag of stuff. And there's so much about you that you haven't yet accepted that is so beautiful and amazing and precious and weird and dark and a little twisted. You're like, guess what? It's a mixed bag here,
it's
people.
A mixed bag,
and, it's not one or the other. And so part of just getting to the truth is you might be really surprised at how consoling the truth can be. Mm-hmm. Not just challenging. It'll be both. That's just the nature of it, right? But there's no going forward without the truth.
Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes we're often waiting for that truth to be from an extant source. And I do think there's great power when you are confronted lovingly by a group of people who love you, who say, hey, we're seeing this. And I think there can be beautiful moments where you have someone come to you and say, this is a hard conversation for me to have, but here's what I'm seeing. But I also wonder sometimes if we are waiting on that instead of understanding that the truth can be right there, that God can reveal a truth to us, that we can do a self-inventory. And so there is that beauty in community, but there's also that self-responsibility that I think sometimes we can lose a little bit in some of these conversations. And for those of us who are rescuers, chief among sinners am I. The sometimes I feel like, oh, if I'm not the one to go intersect and throw myself between this person and what they're doing as their solution, as per your language. So how do we weigh that, both as a community, as individuals? Where do our responsibility lines lie when it comes to this revelation of truth?
I mean, look, if I'm reading your question right, you can go to somebody and say, I have a concern, and this is what it is, about a behavior or a relationship you have with a person, a substance, or a behavior, right? Like, here's what I'm seeing. And so oftentimes with rescuers, and let's just use the word codependent, right? Or we might use
just get all in my business, Ian. Sure,
I'm going to get in your business here, Julie. So, but listen, codependency is a very real addiction. Oh, yeah. Like it's super real. It is a mental health condition that we just always need to keep our eye on, all of us. Right. And some people in particular, certain types of people. So, and then we just present that truth, but we don't feel responsible for changing another person. Right. You can't change another person. That's a no-go. That's not going to happen. That's up to them. I remember this idea for me was important, right? Like knowing the difference between caring about somebody and caring for somebody. Like when your kids are little, you have to care about and for them, right? Because they're little when they're 4 or 5 years old, right? But when they get to be adults, you have to let go of caring for and just care about. And caring about could be, I'm just seeing this pattern and it's worrisome. And what you do with my observation is up to you. My love for you is on the line here, but I can't control, manipulate you to do. And oftentimes codependency, let's face it, oftentimes is just control and manipulation with lipstick on.
Yeah.
We call it helping.
Right.
But really, it's being a controlling and manipulative person who thinks you know best for everybody else, when in fact, we need to offer them the dignity of making their own choices and letting them go.
Yeah, letting them go. I was speaking recently and I did a Q&A session afterward and she was asking, how do I get my spouse to ABC? And I had to tell her, I said, listen, girl, it's somebody who's tried to get all kinds of people to do different things because I wanted to help. Yeah. There's no get them to. You can only present the truth that you want to present in a loving way. And then after that, it's on them. And the corollary to that, Ian, is to me, those people who say, well, no one in my world thinks it's a problem. I don't know why you're coming to me. Nobody else sees that this is an issue. Or those who don't have people saying anything. And yet, I think we know often when we are getting sideways, when we're becoming dependent on something outside of God's grace. And so I guess that's really at the core of that question, not elegantly stated, but just saying it doesn't matter if everybody to your mind thinks that you're conducting your life beautifully. If you know there's gunk going on that you're trying to cover, it's not necessarily a social project in order to decide that you need to move into the truth about your own life. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't ask, because our Enneagram King, I know, here it comes. You knew it had to be there. You knew I couldn't let this opportunity go. Come on, Ian. So tell me, are there Enneagram personality styles that you feel might have a little bit more of a lean toward being on this addiction spectrum in a heavier way?
My short answer is no, right? People will say all the time to me, and you hear in sort of everyday conversation, people say, I have such an addictive personality. And I'm like, actually, that doesn't exist. We have no medical or clinical evidence that there is such a thing as an addictive personality. Now, are there things that we know statistically? There are conditions that there's a higher probability that addictions are somewhere, so for example, usually we know that kids with ADHD have a higher percentage of likelihood of, falling into addictive patterns for a whole host of reasons. So we know that kind of stuff, but there's no sort of like someone who's born with an addictive personality per se. I know addicts of every single Enneagram type and all along the spectrum from mild to severe. So addictions are equal opportunity enslavers. And it's just part of our nature. And now I will say, sometimes those addictions will show interesting patterns. For example, Enneagram 5s. For some reason, I know lots of Enneagram 5s who have video game addictions.
So there may be a solution of choice that may go along with.
Right, a common solution of choice.
Right.
For some reason, I know lots of Enneagram 2s for whom eating is a common solution of choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like eating love almost. Sometimes with 7s, gambling. Sometimes I see with 7s, just even what I would call high risk adrenaline craving activities,
Right.
9s, particularly for self-preservation 9s, you see a lot that are really numbing through food and romance novels and like just getting lost in space,
Right.
I could go through all the types, but you can see some patterns, but none of them are more apt to be addicted to something than anyone else. We're all apt to be addicted to something.
We've all fallen short of the glory.
There you go.
Yeah. That is such a fascinating look at that, to see that kind of templating. That's so unique. That's really interesting. All right. Well, the title of the book is The Fix: How the 12 Steps Offer a Surprising Path for Transformation for the Well-Adjusted, the Down and Out, and everyone in between. So, all of us. And I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to be on and for giving us a fresh look at how the 12 steps, they've been around a while. And you know what? That probably means there's some really incredible wisdom there, a fresh way of looking at what has proven to be such a powerful tool for people. Where can the reader go to find the book, find your podcast, find more of your content, all the good stuff?
So many good things happening. All right. The Fix: How the 12 Steps Offer a Surprising Path of Transformation for the Well-Adjusted, the Down and Out, everyone in between. That means all of us. Amazon, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, wherever
All
you buy
the places.
books.
Yeah.
All the places. Socials, at Ian Morgan Cron. You can go to my website, ianmorgancron.com. And in fact, we just spent like $200,000 or $300,000 in 2 years building a new Enneagram assessment that with a research psychologist, because I just was so disappointed with all the kinds of tests that were out there.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got to come up with the Rolls Royce.
Something better.
And we did. And it just launched. It's called the Typology Institute Enneagram Assessment. That's on the website.
Gets us in the door of your ecosystem. That's where we want to be. So awesome. Well, Ian, I feel like we could go on and on. Like, could we do like a 3, 4, 5-part series? But you got other things you got to do. So I really appreciate your time today for giving us this little window and the encouragement to go look for the truth, to be honest about what solutions we are leveraging to kind of stay away from some of the stuff in our life that needs to be dealt with. Thank you for encouraging us to go get in the garage, get in the basement, figure out what's going on, be honest about it, and walk through 12 places in the journey that helps draw us closer to God's grace. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Julie.
All right, friend, you know what to do. Show notes. Rebecca puts those together every week. You're going to find all of the links that my guest, Ian Morgan Cron, has been talking about. And I want you to go check out the book, all the stuff. Be sure and check out All Mom Does on the socials. I tell you to do that every week, but it's a great place of community. It's where all the links are. Here's the biggest thank you can give us. If this episode has really sparked someone where you think, you know what, so-and-so should hear this, or I want to make sure that I share this with so-and-so, could you please grab the link and go do that? That's how we get the word out about these episodes. I love to interact with you too. Julie Lyles Carr, all the places. Go DM me over at Instagram with further questions, ideas for guests, all that kind of stuff. And I will see you next time on the All Mom Does podcast.
Thanks for listening. We just wanted to take a minute to let you know that just like you and your family, Purposely is also part of a family, the Krista Family of Ministries. Krista helps kids and teens learn and grow in their faith at King Schools and Miracle Ranch Camp. And Krista shares Jesus with people in the poorest, most remote places through World Concern. Krista Senior Living is a community of love and care, and Krista Media is a place of hope on the radio. God is changing lives through these 5 ministries, and Krista is on mission to share the good news of Jesus. To learn more, visit Krista.org.